Yeah. That's Old Town canoeing.
Yeah, that is. That is Old Town.
Right on.
Hi, Chico here today. Well, my job today is we're going to replace some rudder cables on this Predator here. And what happened is when we put this together, we squinched these down too tight and it fatigued the cable end, so we have to replace one. So we're just going to redo both of them. So we've picked up a rudder kit, and let me show you what I need to do. Alright, I start by taking the back rudder connections off at the bail, and watch the little nuts because they go flying around, and this is all small stuff. Both of these have broken loose because they'd been over tightened, so when you make these up to the bail, they don't have to be too tight. I'm going to start up front, and another little trick that I like to do before you start is I'll take a set of little hand clamps and I'll put these where I had the foot strap set, where the customer liked it. And that gives me a good spot while it's pulling on this bungee, and it'll maintain the correct tension. I don't have to worry about it working against me. I also do that as the rear rudder is centered. And you can center it back in the little keeper, or you can just make sure that the bail is the same right to left or port to starboard. Right here where they connect at the end of the rudder strap that goes into the footrests, the simple way for me to do it is I'll just take and snip these, and we're going to redo these at both ends. So you can cut that, and I'll cut this one. Good pair of dikes is what you need for that. And then I'll come back here. We've already got the rudder tubes in here, so the new one's going to go in real easy. So these will pull straight out. No friction, you don't need oil, you don't need powder. And these are the bad ones. Let's get them out of here. Okay, what you're going to need to make up this kit is we're going to use the existing straps in there and make these up to it. And this particular kit already has the little keeper swedged on in the back, so we're going to make up the bend at the front of the setup. So we've got a couple of pieces of shrink wrap and 4 of the brass crimps and 2 of the cables. That's what you're going to need in pieces. What I'll do is I'm going to feed these, making sure that the swedged end, which is the end with this little keeper, stays at the back to make up to the bail. So I'll run these in and pass it through. Okay, then I'll go ahead and pull it through so that I don't have any slack at the back end. And then I'll repeat the same thing on the other side. Now, because the cables were made up at the front end and the back end, but they've used some of the plastic as a keeper right here, I have to cut these to get them off of the nylon so I don't ruin my nylon. So I'm going to use my handy dikes. And lots of times this bend is much more stout as what we're running into now. Okay, we got those cleared. So now it varies on manufacturer of kayak, but now what we've got is the 2 ends that make up to the rudder. Now I want to make sure they're equal length when I make these up, so you can fit it to the customer, or because I left these and clamped them to the right spot and I took it off right where the customer had it, it's perfect. Okay, so I'm taking just one more moment just to make sure these are exactly equal. I know my foot rests are, and now I can pull this slack and make it up through the strap and just let it lay. And do the same on the other side. Okay, so now that we've got everything clear and we've got our straps equal, I want to make sure that I have everything on this wire that needs to be there before I clamp it down. So each one of these gets 2 crimps. So you want to slide the crimps down the line first. Okay, so those are towards the rear, okay? And I'm going to need a shrink wrap. And I like to use the shrink wrap to come over everything at the very end. So this shrink wrap is going to go all the way down the line with the crimp. Okay, now that's pretty critical. Depending on what kind of kit you're using, these could be different, and it might be made up at the back. So your system may vary. This will work on every kayak. Okay, then I'll pull that around and then make sure I've got the same on the other side. Now we go to the back. Now before we had a whole lot of washers holding everything together, but now we're dealing with a system that has it swedged on. So I want to look at the bail and I need to make sure this works right. I prefer this to be on top because even if you lose a bolt underneath, your nut underneath, it's going to still hold your rudder on in a bad situation. And I also like this to be this flat side of the swedge piece down, not like this, so that this doesn't, again, provide more fatigue as it goes back and forth here. So we're going to get a little more swivel in this position. Okay, that's the proper length there. You can drop that on. Same on the other. Just loosely tighten the nylon nut. And these nuts have that nylon keeper in it, so once you get them tight onto the nylon, they're going to hold it pretty well. It's not going to come loose. And since this whole system isn't over tightened, it's going to make your rudder run real freely. It's going to be really nice and slick. With my screwdriver. Okay. So now I'm going to tighten these, but not make sure that I have enough slack so that at this swedged piece it swivels freely. So once it tightens up, I want to back off just a little bit. And I have enough of the bolt sticking through. That's a nice catch. Same on the other side. All the way to tight. Back it off a little bit. These are working very well. Okay. Back up to the front. Okay, so now on the other end, it's going to take, it really only takes one hand if you have a pair of crimpers ready. And let me show you that here. I'm using, it's not a good idea to use a pair of pliers because the pliers don't clamp down evenly and they don't make a flat clamp. And I'm going to use this end of it right here. So a pair of pliers still does it in a V, and it's going to leave one end of these cables undone or ready to come loose. So using a pair of flat crimpers is a good way to go, or if you have a pair of pliers that will crimp flatly, that's what you need to look at. Okay, so now at the other end, I just make sure I've got everything that I need in this system, which is my shrink wrap and at least 2 crimps, because you're going to get one shot at getting this right. The mistakes are made by not having all this set to the proper length and having to go back and do that. So now I'll make sure the bail stays centered, and that's easy to do here because I can just drop it into the little keeper. I know this bail is perfectly centered. Then I come back to the front and make sure I have the same amount of slack on both ends, but I want to make sure I just have the slack out. Because now this has some adjustment. I can even pull a tiny bit so that that shorter person doesn't have to pull it so tight. And depending on how you make it up here, you can decide how big the loop you need to be. And if you like, you can even put a piece of shrink tubing in the loop. It's not necessary. So I'm just going to clamp one piece of it, usually the most forward one, so that it'll hold it for now. And that holds. I'm going to make a second one on it in a minute, but now let's go do the other side. So at this point we should see about the same amount of throw in slack on both sides. And we do have that. And I leave about a 1-inch loop. Get a good start crimp. Ready? So now I'm going to just go through and double crimp it. So now we're good. I have one here. I'm going to make sure I've got the ends crimped real well. Do the backup crimp. And now what I'm going to do is kind of clean up the work a little bit. We'll have to tighten down the nuts, but I'm going to make sure this cut is a pretty good clean cut. I don't want too many burrs sticking out of it, so I don't want to over bend it too much. So I'll get this in one shot, get it as close as I can. Now I want to burr that back just a little bit if I can. Bend that inward, because we're going to cover it with the shrimp tube. Alrighty, now all we do is take our handy dandy Bic lighter or find the nearest smoker, and we just shrink the tube. Nice and clean. There it is. Rudder cable replacement 101. Easy job to do. If it starts fraying, you need to get on it before it leaves you stranded on the water. Thanks for watching.